Hello, in this video I'm going to give you some tips about programming in general. I'm going to give you an exercise soon, and in the next video actually we're probably going to look at some tips about how to get the most out of the course. But in this video, firstly, before all that, I'm going to just talk about programming in general a little bit. So I've got some tips here. We're going to look at these. So my first tip for programming, and these really will help you a lot. This is not just idle chatter. These will help you a lot if you do them. So strive for great formatting and use auto format. So what you should do is when you're developing your code, let's open this. So when you're writing code, run the auto formatter regularly. So remember that's Command-Shift-F on the Mac. It's Control-Shift-F on Windows, and you can alternately, although it takes longer, you can right click the file that you want to format and go to source format. Alright, so run that all the time, run this auto format, because it's really important for the sake of understandability, readability, to keep your code well formatted. But equally, strive to write your code in a way that's well formatted to start with, and you'll know you've got it right because when you run the auto formatter, it won't change your code formatting. The auto formatter will be happy with what you've already written. So try to write your code so that it's formatted well in the first place, and if you get that right, when you run the auto formatter, it won't actually change your code. But keep running the auto formatter, keep doing that. Try to get to a point where it doesn't have to do any work. That will really help you. If you can learn good formatting, you've avoided, one of the worst beginner's mistakes that causes so many problems. Bad formatting really causes wastes a lot of time for beginners. So if you can get it right, start getting it right to start with, then that will give you a big sort of helping hand. Google error messages. So if you make a mistake in your code, let's miss off a semicolon here, you'll get an error icon here, and also if you try to run it, let's save it and run it, you'll get an error down here in the console, unresolved compilation program, syntax error, insert semicolon to complete statement at line 8. I can even click on this line and it takes me to the right line. Now here it's pretty obvious probably what the message means. Well, relatively obvious. It could still catch you out if you're a beginner. It's telling us to put a semicolon at the end of the line. But often you'll get error messages that are quite cryptic and you don't understand them. Type those error messages into Google or the search engine of your choice, and maybe add Java as well. And then you'll often see web pages that will be very helpful. They'll explain to you what mistake you've made, and that's a lot quicker than having to, you can ask questions in the course, but it's a lot faster if you can just get to the bottom of it yourself with a web search. So literally, whatever the error message says when you hover over the red icon or when you run your program, don't be afraid to type that into a search engine and see what comes up. You might need to add Java as well to get the right results, and that will usually help you. It will help you to figure out what's actually gone wrong. Output values of variables. So when you're working through your program, let's take a look at this one here, I think. Put in system.out.println and output the values of variables, and put those in your code wherever you're not sure what the value of a variable is. So at this point, for example, I might be going to write more code further down that depends on total height, and I might want to check that this total height calculation actually works. So at that point I can output the value of this variable total height and check that it is what I expect it to be. And that's something that all the programmers that I know pretty much use that all the time. They put system.out.println in their code to check that variables have the values they expect them to be at that point in the program. So you can output the same variable multiple times as you work down through more and more lines to check that at any point in your program it has the correct value. That's a really useful tip. You'll see me doing that as we go through the course. Write code a little bit at a time, running frequently. So don't write a whole page of code, like a big page bigger than this. Don't write a big chunk of code and without running it. So write your code in little bits and then output the values of important variables or just all your variables or whatever you like. And then run it, check that works. And then you can delete the system.out.println line if you don't need it, and then add more code to it. So what I'm saying is, don't write a big piece of code and only then run it. Write code a little bit at a time. Add code to your programs a little bit at a time. And after you've written a new bit, output the values of some variables so you can check that they are what you expect and run the program. So build up your program a little bit at a time. That will really help you. And you'll also see me doing this in this course, I think. Write the end of a pair of brackets or quotes before filling them in. This will make more sense to you later on. But if you've got something that comes in pairs in your program, like brackets are usually in pairs. So this is a pair of brackets here. That bracket is paired with that bracket. This square bracket is paired with that square bracket. And also this speech mark and this, they're a pair as well. So in general, I recommend when you write some opening pair of something, write the closing pair at the same time, then go in and fill in whatever's in the middle of them. You can do that with quotes and brackets. The point is to avoid situations where you've written an opening quote or an opening bracket and forgotten the closing one. So you might want to come back to this video later on, because this will make more sense to you later on. But keep everything in pairs. Write the closing one soon after you've written the opening one. And finally, make sure you know what you're running, because as a beginner I often got confused. I'd have multiple projects open. I'd click a run button in my IDE and I'd run the wrong code, and then I'd be changing the code and I'd be looking at the output in the console and thinking, why aren't my changes having any effect? And it's simply that you're running the wrong program. So I might be working on this program here, but I click the run button and it doesn't run that code. So make sure you run the right thing. And to be doubly sure, so it helps to have the right code selected, or the right project at least. I think that will probably, that changes what you're actually running. But if you want to be absolutely sure that you're running the right thing, select the file that has your main method in it, right click it and go to source, where are we? Go to run as Java application. So I select something that I want to run. I right click it and I go to I go to run as Java application. And after that, you can just use the run button. But it helps if the first time you run something, if you're not completely sure you're running the right thing, actually select it, right click it and go to run as Java application. And that will help a lot, because if you've got multiple projects open, it's really easy to get confused about what you're running versus what you're writing at the time. That's it for this video. You might want to come back to this later if you start finding programs getting really confusing, but I wanted to just run these tips past you to start with. Okay, so until next time, happy coding. Hello, before we go on to look at some worked examples of what we've seen so far, I've got just a few more tips for you, and most of them relate to the course specifically. First of all, the source code. If you go to github.com/caveofprogramming, this is where I keep my public source code. So you can look at this, look at whatever you want, but if you click on repositories and then go to find Java Beginners 11 in the list, click on that, you can find here all the source code that we're working on. So if I want to see this source code, I can actually browse it and see it here, which is helpful. I noticed that when I provide these repositories, some people want to download the whole thing and then build all the applications. I would recommend not doing that. You can do it if you want to, but I would recommend not downloading it, because you don't learn anything like that, really. What this is best used for is just consulting it if you've got something wrong somewhere and you can't figure out what it is. Of course, you can look back at the video, but it's probably easier to look at this source code in many cases. So take a look at that, and if you keep it open while you work, then you can refer back to it. Okay, so a second thing that I'm going to say here is, to get the most out of the course, always type out code and experiment with it. So you can't learn programming just by watching videos. It's like learning the piano or the violin, or learning a human language for that matter. If you just watch videos, you aren't going to learn it. What you have to do is use the videos as a source of inspiration and information. Type any code that I type in the videos. Make sure at some point you type it out yourself. And even better, try to think, how could you change that code without breaking the program? Try to make some meaningful change to it. Experiment with it. And the more you do that, the more you'll learn. You will find sometimes you'll create bugs and errors. Maybe you won't be able to fix them. But if you spend some time trying to figure out why your program doesn't work, even if you never actually figure out why that is at this stage, all the time you spend doing that, puzzling over it, will really help, especially if, rather than just looking at it, you also experiment with it. Try outputting the values of variables. Try to experiment with it kind of physically, change the code, try to get it to work and to run. But the main thing here is type everything out and also experiment with it a little bit. Try to change it and still have it run in a meaningful way and do something useful. Because you won't learn just by watching videos. It's a practical skill like learning the piano. Let's take a look at this one. So I would say focus on practice, not memorization or notes. And the reason that I say this is because I've seen beginners try to learn programming by, like, they have a lesson or they watch some videos and they make endless notes on it, or they really strain their brains trying to memorize everything. And I would say that's not an effective way to learn. The effective way to learn is to practice. Think of it just like learning the guitar or whatever. You've got to practice. Practice is the key to it. So don't worry too much about memorizing things. Don't worry too much about making notes, but practice everything. So everything that you want to learn, you have to actually try it out yourself, check that it works, experiment with it a little bit. If you do that enough, you will learn programming bit by bit. You may sometimes feel very puzzled, but eventually you'll get the hang of it. And it's really a question of how much time you spend doing that. You have to practice. And a lot of practice is going to be needed. But the good news is that after a certain point, programming tends to be addictive. People tend to get addicted to it and time flies by. Not everyone has that experience, but many people do. That you start writing programs, and when you reach a certain level of fluency, you get into this state of mind where you're just curious and you think, well, I could add this new feature to this program, see if that works. And it becomes an addictive process for many people. And that can really help with the practice. If you're addicted to something, of course, you'll practice it a lot. Don't forget to go outside, though, and take breaks. Don't screw yourself up with programming. But practice is the key. And finally, this is optional. Learn to touch type. Touch typing means being able to type on your keyboard without looking at the keyboard. Now, I think only about half of all programmers, for a guess, have this skill, and the others do what we call hunting and pecking. They hunt and peck. So they keep looking down at their keyboard. They use 1, 2, 3, however many fingers, and they just type the characters one by one. That's fine. It's totally fine. But if you want to learn even faster, then learn to touch type. You can find free touch typing programs on the internet. If I search for free touch typing, you can find various links here to programs online that you use on the internet that teach you to touch type. And it's actually not that hard to learn to touch type. Probably most people can do it in a few weeks or less, especially if you start touch typing your emails. It's difficult at first to make the transition from hunting and pecking to touch typing, but you can learn this quite quickly. And when you've learnt it, your typing speed will increase a lot. Now, although typing speed isn't a big deal in programming, you can type slowly, and you're still gonna be writing programs. Programming is not primarily about typing speed; it's not so important. But a major reason that people get discouraged with programming is they just feel it's taking them too long and too much effort to write code, so they avoid writing code. And you can learn a lot more effectively if you touch type for this reason, in my opinion. You can learn faster because you're less discouraged from writing code. You don't think, well, how long will it take me to type out total height, or, how long? You don't think like that. Instead, you think and your fingers do the typing, more or less. So touch typing can help make you less reluctant to type code. And by doing that, it makes it easier to learn coding. Nevertheless, that is optional, and probably half of all programmers, something like that, they just hunt and peck. They don't learn touch typing, so it's up to you. Okay, so until next time, happy coding. Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at a worked example of converting temperature in Celsius to Fahrenheit. So generally these days in the UK we use Celsius to measure temperature. So we consider room temperature to be about 21, whereas in the USA, as far as I know, Fahrenheit is used. And well, what we're going to do is convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. So I would suggest pausing the video at this point and having a go at it yourself. If you go to Google and you type something like convert Fahrenheit to Celsius, then you can find a formula for how to do it. So what this is telling us is that you take the temperature in Fahrenheit, subtract 32 from it, then you've got to take that and multiply it by 5 divided by 9. But don't forget that you can't divide one integer by another in Java, or rather you can, but it discards the remainder, so you want to use doubles there. Okay, so pause the video and have a go at that yourself. If you find yourself sort of struggling a bit, that's actually good. It's great if you can just write the program, but if it takes you a little while and you have to think about it, that's good, because all the while you're looking at this program and typing stuff and trying to get it to work, you're learning. So, okay, pause the video now. All right, so hopefully you had a go at that. Let's see how to do this. So I'll zoom out here, and then here, the first thing to do is we'll declare our temperature in Fahrenheit. So double Fahrenheit. And let's set it to some temperature to start with. So let's say we want to convert 91 Fahrenheit to a temperature in Celsius. I don't know what that is. I have a feeling it's quite hot. We'll see. Let's also have a variable for storing our Celsius. So let's say double Celsius. And what's Celsius going to be assigned? What value will we assign it? Well, we're going to take the temperature in Fahrenheit and we're going to subtract 32 from it. Now, in order to make sure that we do the calculations in the right order here, let's put that in round brackets, because that's the first thing we want to do. We want to take temperature in Fahrenheit, subtract 32, and then we're going to work with that. The next thing we want to do is we want to multiply that by 5 divided by 9. So let's do that. Let's multiply it, so that's an asterisk, by, and we can't say 5 divided by 9, that would be integer division, it would discard the remainder, So in this case, that will give us 0. But we can say 5.0 divided by 9, or we can also say 5.0 divided by 9.0, or 5 divided by 9.0. As long as there's a double in there, we get double division. That should do the trick. So now we can type sys out, and let's write temperature. Well, actually, let's write the whole thing out. Let's say Fahrenheit, and I'm going to add to that some text, concatenate some text. Fahrenheit, let's say, so this is going to say, that's going to say so far, like, for example, 91. So let's say 91 degrees Fahrenheit. I think that should have a capital F, not on the variables because they have to have a lowercase first letter. So 91 degrees Fahrenheit is plus Celsius plus degrees Celsius. Let's run that. I think I had the street cleaner running past, so sorry about the noise. We'll try running this. And there we've got 91 degrees Fahrenheit is 32.7778 degrees Celsius. So by British standards at least, that's very hot. A temperature we rarely encounter, in fact. So what have I done here? Well, you see that I've basically just joined numbers and text together. And when I join the text to the number, I started off, so inside the double quotes here, I started off with a space. And that gives us this nice space here. So after is, we've also got a space. And that's this space here. And so then we've got the temperature in Celsius, and we've got finally some more text to finish it off. And we've got a space there as well. So the whole thing comes out nicely spaced. One thing that isn't good is that we've got a lot of digits here. And we're going to look at how to deal with that in the next section when we take a look at strings and text. I don't think there's anything else to say about this. It should be fairly straightforward, but if you found it confusing, you couldn't do it, whatever, don't worry too much. But if you couldn't do the exercise, definitely type this out yourself and try playing around with it a bit, see if you can change the formatting or whatever. If there's anything in it that bothers you, try to guess how it works and maybe make changes and see if your changes work as you expect. But definitely type it out, whatever you do, unless you successfully wrote the program. Okay, we'll leave it there for now, and until next time, happy coding.